Welcome to Light Data Action, the podcast that's on a mission to help you discover new technology trends and tools and better understand how they affect the world around us. I'm your host, Terry Barbounis, and in each episode, I'll speak with industry executives and thought leaders to discuss how these technologies change the way we do business and how you can stay ahead of the innovation. If you're ready, let's join the conversation. Hey everybody, I'm Terry Barbounis, Director of Innovation Strategy for Lumen's Product Innovation and R&D team. I'm also the host for Lumen's external thought leadership podcast, Light Data Action. This week we're taking the show on the road. We're in San Francisco at the 2023 Game Developer Conference, and today we're going to talk about Metaverse, why infrastructure and platforms are key, certainly in the gaming industry, but in other industries as well. Joining me today in my panel is Steve Wallo, CTO of Vcinity, and Umesh Lakshman, Head of Solutions Architecture at Lumen. Gentlemen, welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
Steve, can you just take a moment and talk a little bit about what Vcinity does? Because I think it's very unique in sort of understanding some of the things that we can do with infrastructure today.
Sure, absolutely. So Vicinity's been around for about 4 or 5 years. It's really a two-sided coin. So one part of Vicinity is just the ability to move data faster than anything you've ever seen on the planet, from A to B. What's unique about that, though, is it's done without touching the data, meaning no compression, no deduplication. It's all based on flow control and some other things. But what we did is we evolved that to something very novel in the industry, which is the ability to not have to worry about data locality. Meaning, I can have a compute platform, let's say in the cloud, actually reach across over the high latent WAN and actually execute on that data in real time without having to move the data at all.
Right.
So we're almost bipolar. Do you want to move the data really fast? We'll move it fast. If you don't want to move the data, you just want to keep it in place. Think cloud compute, edge data, edge compute, cloud data. That separation is what we've enabled in the industry. It's very unique, very different. One of the reasons we partner with you guys is because we don't make the glue in the middle, we just make the glue better, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, thanks.
Exactly.
It's something very different.
So Umesh, when we talk about Metaverse, I mean, these digital infrastructures we're already deploying. We talk about edge, cloud computing, and so forth. How does Metaverse make the deployment of that type of environment different? Or does it? Is it just another application of the same?
I'm going to quote Adam from yesterday and say, Metaverse is marketing, right? It's at the end of the day, Metaverse is not a single thing. It's not a single entity anymore. It's a blob of multiple blobs, multiple domains, multiple platforms that are put together to create an experience, potentially immersive. And to create that immersion, you're now having to solve for things like what Vcinity is solving for, right? There's no way you're going to be able to create that immersion without the access to data, the access to compute, as close as possible to the user. And while we are the glue on the back end to connect all of that last mile access piece is that missing link that we're trying to solve for in that immersion state. So, Metaverse is many things to many people, but for all effective purposes, a unique immersive experience is how I would see it.
Yeah. Steve, from your purview, does this idea of being able to reach out, touch and manipulate data, does it change anything in the context of Metaverse, or does it become more of an enabling technology for things like Metaverse?
Oh, I think it's definitely an enabling technology. I mean, you brought up a good point, right? Is it marketing now? Yeah, kind of, right? But in order to get to the next level, you have to have some technology that can enable this thing to reach these parts and pieces that aren't sitting beside you, right? The last thing you want is some immersive technology that it's all well and good as long as everything's there, but if you want to look at something remote, it's out of sync, it's not up to date, it's old, it's stale. So you're blending real-time information that you can interact with and integrate with stuff that is just, it's a little pixely or it's just not working, it's irrelevant to what you're trying to do. So without something that allows us to reach across in real time and bring with a cohesivity for all this stuff together, I don't think it's going to exist, right? It'll exist locally, but what's the value in that? There might be some, industries, manufacturing, things like that, right? But if you want to do something where you want to look at other things and you want to do this kind of visual or analytic fusion of information globally, you got to find a way to reach it, right? So I think that's some technology that will helpfully get this out of pure marketing, right?
I'm going to make a quick comment or a use case I spoke to somebody here about.
Yeah.
And it was having the concept of having augmented reality or virtual reality glasses to take a look at your golf swing in real time, process that data with everything that's happening in the back end in terms of machine learning, compute, and coming up with real-time data back to you to say, hey, if you fix these 2-3 things by 1-2 degrees, you will improve your golf swing by 5%, right? To create that, you're going to connect everything that just Steve talked about with a lot of back-end pieces, both in terms of network and the whole stack of the infrastructure to create that. So Metaverse is almost an all-encompassing status or a statement that we always talk about, but there's so many niche use cases that all kind of fit together in that immersion process.
I mean, yeah, it's a great point. So just to add on to that, where you mentioned the golf swing. So, I play golf, but I get a lot of swing for my money. Let's say it at that, right? But having somebody record that and understand it and have the equipment and the ability for the technology to capture what you need to capture is one thing, but then where is the talent? Where is the person that can actually look at it and say, well, you have to do this, right? And if that takes a day, an hour to move that information, is that person still available? Is there still value in waiting around for these decisions to occur, right? That's where I think gluing stuff together in a unique way, not necessarily for the visual aspect to have everything in one spot, but being able to take the executable product that you've created and allow somebody else to take a look at it that is geographically anywhere in the world, right? In a manner that allows it to be relevant and value, right?
We talked in an earlier session about how cybersecurity applies to the gaming industry. Is it much different, or is it really the same types of concerns? With what Vcinity does, in particular, if you don't have to move the data, there's also a component where you're minimizing your exposure to threats at least one less step. Do you see that dynamic a lot with your customers?
I do. So there's a couple things about that, right? I mean, security is always a layered kind of question and a multiple layer answer, right? One of the things about the attack vector that you're mentioning, right? The more copies of data I have, the larger the footprint of the same information for somebody to get to, right? So if I can reduce the amount of copies, I have 10 people that want to look at the data, I have 10 copies. If I can say I have 10 people that want to look at the data, they're all looking at the same copy, there's one benefit there from a security perspective, right? The other one, though, is, the way that our technology works is, it's not one silver bullet. It's not just a networking thing. There's a lot of other pieces involved. But one of them is that we're only moving the pieces of information of interest at any given time. So let's say I have a big, huge data set, a terabyte of data, but my application only wants to look at 100 gig. In the past, you'd move the entire terabyte, which is a lot of data exposed, right? Now you're only moving the 100 gig of what somebody's interested in. So you're not moving as much, you're not creating as much visibility into the information that you want to control or has sensitivity behind it. So yeah, I think there's a couple things associated with that.
Yeah. Umesh, do you have a perspective on that from a Lumen infrastructure perspective?
Well, my perspective is more around security is so multi-layered, like you just mentioned, that's one. But I think there's security inside the game ecosystem as well as outside of creating that ecosystem.
Right.
Right. Like we take the traditional data view, we're going to have to address the 7 layers of the OSI model, for lack of a better word, to get the data there and being secure about it. But the second phase of that is now how do we protect a person who's gaming and the experience in that ecosystem and doing so securely, because then you're starting to overlay the concept of looking at AI and machine learning and the chats and making sure that they are copacetic, they're open to children being on the same ecosystem and all of that, right? So there's the involvement of the ecosystem and the person in it versus securing the stack as a whole. Those are 2 pieces we need to solve for anyway.
With the trend being multi-venue environments, whether it's multi-cloud, public cloud, private cloud, on-prem, edge, and so forth, are we in an environment now where when you look at a use case, the end user, the customer, the enterprise, on one hand doesn't really care which venue they're in. It sort of becomes, if you recall when the iPhone had come out and everybody was comparing it to the Android phones, And your friend that had the Android phone would say, mine has 2 gigs of memory in it. And Apple wouldn't talk about how much memory, because Steve Jobs' perspective was, well, does it do what you need it to do? Who cares what the individual components are? Are we in an environment now where there's that same dynamic where a customer comes to Lumen, they come to Vcinity, and as long as the technology can enable them to have either pieces or all of their infrastructure in these various venues and it works, it really isn't, well, we're never going to go to public cloud, we're never going to go to private cloud. It's what is the workload, what's the attribute you put on that workload, and if it works, who cares what the venue is? Do you see that dynamic?
Totally, and that's very well said. Is trying to put the right resource in the right place to create the right experience.
Right.
And that's almost data and content agnostic. So irrespective of what use case and what vertical and retail and gaming and everything else, manufacturing you look at the end of the day, it's simple technology creating a simplistic outcome. And to do that, the venue really, it's more about the venue and what type of resource you put in that said venue. You're never going to walk away from public clouds. You're never going to not have a private cloud either. And you're never not going to look at edge, to be very honest. That seems to be the next logical step, getting closer to the user. So those three are going to coexist no matter what, in what ecosystem for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, good point. So a couple of things about that, right? I think many years ago, people had that naivety that said, I don't care where things are, I plugged it in, it works, here it is, because everything was right there.
Right.
And then we as a industry broke that, right? But the people still want that. You know, I want to be able to say, I don't know where my data is, I don't really care, I just want to be able to do my thing. So it's up to us as an industry to, how do we fix that, right? And you mentioned putting the right data in the right spot at the right time. And that is kind of the traditional approach of doing that, which is, you need to move it here, you need to move it here, right? From our perspective, the utopia would be, we don't really care about the locality, right? We want some other entity, not us, you guys, to manage that information, to know what is needed where, when, and why, not only the data, but the compute. And then we just provide the mechanism to give somebody that ability to say, oh, I really don't care where it is, nor do you guys, right? You just present, here it is, and it's being used, right? And I think we're going to get there. I think that's some kind of blend of us unbreaking the thing that we've break to make better, right?
Yeah.
You actually led me to the next comment, which is the whole concept of network disaggregation and composability, right? Which is exactly where you're headed, which is to put any sub-function of a resource, GPU as a service, everything as a service is where we are headed, so that we can almost democratize that experience from a resource standpoint to say, I want GPU from here, compute cycles from here, location there, to create a very low latency experience, so it all feels like it's coming from here, right? So that disaggregation, composability is the next phase, of course.
Yeah, and that's the key word, the democratization of what? It's not just the data, but of the resources, because it could be edge, could be prem, could be compute. So having that ability to allow that agility, that democratization of whatever needs to be there at the appropriate time, that's where we're headed, right? And I think you guys are driving that really well, right?
You know, when we look at use cases within media entertainment, we see a lot now with the idea of being able to do remote video editing, right? Very large files. You have, movie industry, for example, that is filming in one location, but their post-production could happen halfway across the world. But within the gaming space, especially when you talk about esports and so forth, that is also, you hear the same thing. It's a different kind of editing. You're not editing a movie per se, or in some cases you are, but you are doing video and audio and so forth. Are there other use cases like that, some of which may be unique, that are coming out of the gaming industry, or seem similar to a use case in another industry that you see more and more now being adopted by gaming?
I do, and it's mostly because the talent is not usually co-located anymore, right? My talent is geographically distributed, right? And a lot of these things, as much as we're doing DevOps in parallel, it is a very process workflow-oriented piece. You do this, you add on, you create this, we add on the texture, we do these other things, right? You're waiting for the next guy to finish this piece. And if that person might be able to finish it quickly, but in order to get the information to the next stage takes forever, then the process is always slowing down, right? You're always behind, not because of the talent and its ability to work in a timely manner, but the ability to take that work product and move it to now where all of a sudden my talent resides, right? I think that's becoming very, very prevalent in the industry.
Yeah.
I think the concept also, especially post-COVID, I think we have become very location agnostic. If somebody comes and asks you where is your company headquartered, does it really matter? Because half your workforce is everywhere now. So going back to talent, it's not just about creating that workflow experience as we go through any use case. It's about delivering that same workflow with the same experience to that employee, irrespective of whether they're in China, whether they're in Australia, whether they're in the US or Latin America for the case, and doing it seamlessly. So it almost feels like more than one person is working on the same thing at the same time with minimal to zero lag. And that, I think, is the next stage, of course, what we're trying to solve for.
That's actually really a point, because you want that same experience, right? You don't want to be close to information for one editor, and then the next guy it's 10,000 miles away, right? So yeah, I think that's huge, and that relates to where do I put my edge processing? Where you guys have a perfect fit, because you have that global footprint that has regionalized pieces where you're not, I'm really centralized here, but I don't have anything here. This is a perfect fit for, I think, what we could do together, right? Which is take your infrastructure, which is everywhere, and then layer on top of our stuff to give people that same experience, right? Regardless of where the information actually sits. Yeah.
How even with these advanced technologies, even with what Vcinity brings to the table, how important, certainly for Lumen, is, and in Lumen's case, that not only having a massively peered IP data network, but having a network that you own that allows you to do things. I mean, that's still connective tissue, right? It's still fundamental. That again, even with what Vcinity can do, the fact that the network itself can pick up a lot of the slack and it's sort of the gravy on top is still fundamentally important.
Oh, 100%. Without the connectivity and the ability to scale and do the things you guys do, we don't do that. We're just a piece of software sitting there waiting for something to happen, right? So yeah, it's a perfect complement, 100%.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the network, the footprint, the concept of being always on net, and now when you overlay the fact that something like Black Lotus Labs sees 80% of the internet traffic, either directly or through one hop out, makes it such a unique experience to be on net, and also creates that very unique gaming experience as well, because you're effectively creating a very tight ecosystem with minimal non-peering connections that are going across.
How with Vcinity, Steve, one of the things that I remember when you and I had first chatted years ago about what Vcinity does, I think the thing that kind of hit me was realizing that you have data sitting over here, and you can have compute anywhere, different compute attaching to the same data, so you basically disaggregated the entire thing. How important, because with Vcinity, there's also an advantage if you do move and transfer the data. Do you still see that mentality where you talk about, well, you don't have to move it, and people still go, well, if you were to move it, where we're still doing things the way we have, or are we moving on from thinking the way we have thought because that's the only way you could do it?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is yes for both, right? We still see people kind of stuck in the mantra of, well, I still got to move data from A to B. I kind of get what you're saying, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that. There's risk associated. Maybe not, right? It all depends on where you want to put your priorities, right? If you're having this problem and it is a tangible issue, then that is a priority to fix, right? As opposed to just a science project, right? But are we moving away from that? Absolutely. I mean, look at some of the innovations that are coming in this conference alone, right? We're looking at things that we never thought was possible, and the whole idea behind these things is to get exposure to it, to realize that there is an alternative to what I've been used to in the past with just FedEx and drives around or waiting a day for me to get my data, right? So yeah, I think the trend is moving towards that direction. Technology is moving forward. People expect it, they want it, the passion that people have to get the information and to develop it rather than waiting around. I want that instant piece, right? My kids are like, I grew up in the era of I got to wait. Yeah, I got to wait a day to eat. Okay, that's fine. They want like, how quick can my microwave cook it, right? So, that is, I think, part of the culture, and that's driving this, which is fantastic, 100%.
I mean, you just say. Yeah. No, I have a 9-year-old at home, so it makes perfect sense. It's like instant gratification. It's like, is my cookie there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Is it downloaded yet? Is the game downloaded yet? 22 minutes? Really? 22 minutes? What is a gig?
Yeah.
All of that happens at my house. So I think from Lumen's stance, we're trying to make that dream happen.
Yeah.
That dream of really trying to connect people, data, apps quickly, securely, effortlessly, anywhere. And almost democratize that experience because we have any sub-resource or sub-function of said resource available to be able to elastically pull into and orchestrate that unified experience. That's what we're really trying to shoot for.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, with Lumen, we have this platform that's underpinned, that to me, I was related to a kitchen island, right? If I wasn't in technology, I'd be in cooking or something. But you have this island, and it has drawers, and you have tools, and you can make anything, any dish on that island. You can always add additional functionality. How, when you look at platforms like the Lumen platform, where it starts with network, and you've built up on top of it, an edge network, and you continue to add tools, GPUs as a service, and other things, how important are platforms versus kind of a more disaggregated infrastructure, certainly to an industry like gaming?
I'll let you answer.
Thanks.
I can tell you the Lumen answer.
Yeah, no, I think it's extremely important, right? I mean,
Yeah.
The disaggregated approach is nice. It's like when building your own PC first came about. Right. Yeah, I can build a better PC by getting my parts and pieces from wherever, but people would screw it up in the process, and then you'd end up with a worse product, right? Having somebody that has done that upright work for you to glue the best of pieces together to create a full platform or a solution, as opposed to just use this disaggregated piece, that's massive. And as a developer, at least in my understanding, for whether it's gaming or anything else, I want to spend my time on my creativity, on my craft, on working the code, understanding what brings passion to the people that are playing it, as opposed to worrying about, did this work or did this not? Where's my outsource of IT resource? I don't want to worry about that kind of stuff. Go to one stop shop that has it all built, baked, ready to go, and then let me do what I do really well, which is create a game or something that is interesting and sellable in the market, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to one of the vendors here at the show that has, they've got people with bodysuits with the sensors skateboarding, and they're rendering that outside for the audience to see. And so I asked one of the folks that were working there, I said, are you rendering this on the network or locally? And they said locally. I said, well, how much latency, what's the latency that you would need to be able to pull this off? And he said, well, we need at least 10 milliseconds. And I said, well, what if you put it on a network that could do that? And initially kind of looked at me like, where? Or we didn't realize that. And so I think it's part of it is the more use cases we have, and the more we push that technology, the more it becomes standard. So let me ask you this: where are the challenges then? There's a lot of cool tools. Lumen is certainly doing it. Vicinity is still doing it. But even with those tools, if you look at infrastructure platforms, what's happening with Metaverse, AI, certainly the gaming industry, where do you still see challenges that we all collectively need to solve for?
I think the first one is scale. Scale to me is the toughest one to solve for, because you don't know what the upper end of scale looks like. And especially in this place here in gaming, you do not know what the upper end of scale and what kind of experience you're trying to create. So we quickly find ourselves that when we build a platform, and especially if you build a platform that's trying to solve many things for many people, you end up with situations where it doesn't scale well enough for those many things for many people.
Right.
So I think as a platform for Lumen, at least, what we're trying to really solve for is like to balance out the flexibility piece, but also create like Lego blocks. I use Lego a lot as a context, but Lego blocks model so that when people really want to focus on creativity, here you go, you can build this easy ecosystem that's just bolt on, and you can go on and build your own stack. Or if you want to build a Millennium Falcon of Legos, here you go. This is the other option of it.
I like the Lego analogy, so I'll come back to that. But I think there's really two things that are challenging, at least from what we see. What is, it's the status quo. This is what we've always done.
Right.
I'm risk averse. I have to be, however, I want to be able to innovate and grow. Where is that fine line, right? And us as a group that complements each other, it's our job to go in and help them understand the value behind it, right? And show it to them. As far as the Lego pieces go, from when we have something like Vicinity where it's very horizontal, it can do a lot of things, but does it do everything that everybody needs? No, right? So, can I build a Millennium Falcon with 2 Legos, and a penny? Well, probably not, right? So, got to pick, where it's going to fit and where it's not. I think that's one of the challenges, and it's us working with not only you guys, but gaining feedback from the industry to say, okay, here's my use cases. Is this a fit or not? Now that I understand better what your use cases are, as opposed to what I assumed. Right?
So if you look in the future a little bit, is there one thing that you hope to see over the next few years, not just within the gaming industry, but in terms of industry in general, to make all this easier, more frictionless, self-service? Because as I said in one of the prior sessions, I think it's almost incumbent on providers sometimes to take some of this, what could be very esoteric technology, and make it as much self-service or pay-as-you-go, because the easier you make it for somebody to be able to hit a button and say, I can do X, the easier it's going to be. You can't always do that because of the complexity. But is there one thing that if you could rub the magic lamp that you'd love to see over the next few years?
Yeah, I think you actually nailed it. I mean, I always tell people I can give you the greatest thing since sliced bread, but if you got to change half your infrastructure and your workforce and your training and your operations to use it, there's no value, right? So I think getting these new kind of bleeding edge technologies baked together and then packaged in a way that people, from your earlier question, I don't really care where it is. I just want to go ahead and use this. I want to click a button and off it goes. You guys can provide that kind of overlay, while under the hood over the next year or two, we remove that complexity and then add the piece on top that gives somebody that experience. I think that's where we want to see it go. I think we're driving towards that.
Yeah.
As you were leading into that, all I could think of is one ring to rule them all. That's my Lord of the Rings reference. But if I was really thinking about it, the one we need to solve for is how to abstract at scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the more we abstract and get less dependent on the underlay that creates that experience overall, the more flexibility it gives us to do what we're trying to do, like that whole democratization experience anywhere. So I think that's what we need to solve for across the board, be it infrastructure, platform, app, wherever it sits.
That's awesome. Thank you both, Steve, Umesh, for taking the time. Clearly there's more to be done within Metaverse, whether it's infrastructure, platforms, and so forth. For those of you that enjoyed this content, stay tuned. We've got more coming in the near future. Thank you.